At the beginning of the story, we are shown Germany's Eiger Mountain, which stands 3,967 meters tall. However, no climber has ever succeeded in reaching its peak. Among those who tried were two climbers named Karl and Max, who attempted to scale it from the north face, but went missing. Many efforts were made to find them, but they were never located and were eventually declared dead. After that, the German government banned climbing on the mountain. But as the 1936 Olympics were approaching, youth believed that the first person to summit Eiger would be considered an Olympic hero. Then we see some journalists in a Berlin newsroom discussing that the first person to climb Eiger should be a German. One of the journalists says he has heard about two climbers named Tony and Andy, who are experts at mountain climbing. He suggests they should approach them and use their story as a newspaper headline. A photojournalist named Lucy is also present, who has known Tony and Andy since childhood. The editor-in-chief sends Lucy to talk to Tony and Andy. In the next scene, we see Tony and Andy cleaning toilets at a mountaineering office as punishment for breaking curfew. When they return home, find Lucy waiting for them. Andy happily hugs her when he sees her. She meets Tony too, and we learn that they were previously in a relationship. But Lucy left the village to pursue a job in the city. Later, they all go to a bar where Lucy explains that, since the Olympics are near, many climbers want to make history by conquering the mountain. She wants Tony and Andy to be the first to do it, so the whole of Germany can respect and admire them. Andy agrees, but Tony is hesitant and reminds them about Karl and Max, despite being top-class climbers. They couldn't make it, he says. The mountain is too dangerous and refuses to climb it. However, the next day, Tony changes his mind and agrees to climb. They go to their office to request leave, but their officer refuses. Since they are determined, they resign from their jobs, go home, pack their gear, start their journey to Switzerland by bicycle about 700 kilometers from their village. Meanwhile, Lucy and her boss find out that two Austrian climbers are also planning to scale Eiger. They take a train to Switzerland to interview them and stay in a first-class hotel. After 2 days of travel, Tony and Andy also reach Switzerland and see that several professional climbers have already set up camp. They pitch their tent as well. In the evening, they meet the Austrian climbers, Edie and Willie, and have dinner together. The next morning, Tony begins preparing for the climb. They plan to first carry food and essential gear up the mountain, leave it at a safe spot, and then return. Note: video reference section before the video continues. I'd like to request something. 99% of viewers watch my videos, but don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. So, I kindly request you to please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It really helps. When Tony and Andy come back down, they see Lucy and her boss interviewing the climbers. Lucy is surprised to see Tony and Andy there because Tony had earlier refused to join. The editor-in-chief invites the two climbers for dinner, and they all eat together. Before leaving, Tony meets Lucy and gives her the diary he always carries with him during climbs. Let me know if you'd like the rest of the story translated. 2. Here is the English translation of the next part of the story. This time, however, his return is uncertain. That's why he doesn't want his memory to be erased if something happens to him, Lucy tells him. I will wait for your return. After this, Tony goes outside and wakes Andy, saying the weather is completely clear and it's the best time to get ahead of their competitors. So they begin the climb at night. At the same time, the Austrian climbers also wake up and start following them. By morning, all of them reach the point where Tony and Andy had left their supplies earlier. While Andy is fixing a piton, some rocks start to fall. One of the rocks hits the Austrian climber Heinrich on the head, injuring him badly. His partner Edie tells him they should go back down, but since their team is sponsored by the military, they can't return empty-handed. Andy tells them not to follow behind and suggests they take a different route up the mountain, but the Austrians still follow the same path. When all of them reach 2,800 meters, they face a new problem. There's no direct path upward. They must climb from the other side of the mountain. Andy comes up with a solution. He decides to swing across using a rope to the other side of the mountain so he can fix a rope there and create a new path. Hanging from a rope at 3,000 meters is extremely risky, A small mistake could cost Andy his life. But somehow, he makes it to the other side and secures the rope, creating a new route. After this, Tony invites the Austrian climbers to join their team now. All four of them begin to move forward together. When Andy starts pulling the rope back in, Tony tells him to leave it there in case they need to descend that way. But Andy, confident that they'll reach the summit, removes the rope. Anyway, as they keep climbing, the team reaches the second ice fall at 3,100 meters. By then, it's 8 p.m., so they stop to rest in a narrow cliff space about 2 meters wide. Tony says that if all goes well, they'll finish the climb tomorrow, the next morning. They wake up to freezing temperatures and dense fog. Tony realizes a snowstorm could strike at any moment, so they begin climbing again without delay. But Willie's condition has worsened. He's bleeding from the head and struggling to climb. Meanwhile, the journalists are observing the team through binoculars from a distance. During the climb, Andy finds a bag buried in the snow. Thinking it might have useful supplies from previous climbers, he starts digging with Tony's help. They soon realize it's the body of one of the climbers, their Carl or Max, who had previously attempted the climb. They recover the body, offer prayers, and then slide it down the mountain inside a bag. After this, they continue their journey and reach an altitude of 3,350 meters, much higher than the second ice fall. They tie themselves together with ropes for safety as the terrain becomes more dangerous, but climbing further becomes increasingly difficult. Willie, who had a head injury, is now extremely exhausted. During the climb, he loses his grip and slips, pulling Andy down with him. Willie's leg gets stuck in a crevice, and he screams in pain. Tony and Andy manage to hold the rope. Preventing a worse fall, Edie climbs down the rope to reach Willie and sees that his leg is broken. Now it becomes impossible for all four to reach the summit together. Tony and Andy have two choices: either leave the Austrians behind and head for the summit, or try to bring Willie down safely. Andy argues they came for the summit and should keep going. But Tony says Willie urgently needs a doctor, otherwise he'll die from blood loss. He insists they must take him down. Andy says they're so close to the peak, and if they return now, they may never get another chance. But Tony explains that it's a matter of human life, and no summit is more important than a person. Eventually, they decide to bring Willie down. By evening, a heavy snowstorm begins. The team takes shelter in a crevice for the night. The next morning, they resume their attempt to bring Willie down, but the weather is terrible. Snow keeps piling up around them, and they manage to descend only a few meters all day before darkness falls. They stop at 3,170 meters. By this time, all their supplies have run out, and the storm shows no signs of letting up. Meanwhile, Lucy, deeply worried about Tony and Andy, arrives at the Eigerwan station, located at an altitude of 2,865 meters. She shouts their names, and Andy hears her, calling back, "We're coming down soon." The group reaches the point from where they need to descend the mountain's other side, but the rope that was needed for this is missing. It's the same rope that Tony had warned Andy not to remove now. Andy has to once again try to secure a rope to the other side. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Here is the English translation of the final part of the story. Andy tries to secure the rope again, but by now the mountain is covered in snow. Despite several attempts, he can't get a grip. Tony says that if they stay here in the storm, they'll freeze to death. So they decide they must descend immediately. They begin lowering the injured Willie first. But before they can get him down, an avalanche suddenly strikes from above, sweeping Andy away. One of the Austrian climbers hits his head on a rock and dies on the spot. Andy is now unconscious from the injury, while Willie is left hanging by a rope. Tony alone is trying his best to hold the rope out after a short while. Andy regains consciousness and starts climbing back up using the rope. He sees that the other climber has died. Meanwhile, the last piton holding the rope starts to come loose. Tony tries to fix it repeatedly, but Andy knows that a single piton cannot bear the weight of all four climbers to save Tony's life. Andy cuts the rope with a knife, sacrificing his own life to save his friend. Seeing this, Tony breaks down in tears. He doesn't know what to do anymore. To survive the cold, Tony tries to pull out his sleeping bag to wait for the rescue team. but in his panic, the bag slips from his hands and falls down the mountain. Now, he has no protection from the freezing cold. He starts yelling for help. Lee hears his cries and quickly calls the rescue team. They start moving through the tunnel route and soon locate Tony's position. But the storm is too intense to attempt a rescue, so they must wait for it to calm. Meanwhile, Tony keeps crying out, begging, "Please come back for MI, don't want to die." Lucy gets closer to his location and says, "You are not alone. We'll rescue you in the morning." And she then sits in the storm all night waiting by his side. The next morning, the storm finally subsides. The rescue team prepares to save Tony. He is still alive, despite enduring a freezing night. His face is turned black, and his hands and feet are completely frozen. The rescue team can't reach him directly, so they tell him to lower a rope. But Tony doesn't have a rope long enough, so the team tells him to untie and extend the rope he already has. Even moving his hands is painful, but with great effort. He manages to untie the rope using his teeth, ties the segments together, and throws it down. The rescue team ties a stronger rope to it and sends it up to him. However, they misjudge the height, and even after tying 2 ropes together, it still falls several meters short from the ground. Tony slowly begins to descend, and Lucy is overjoyed to see him coming down. But just when he's only a few meters from the ground, a knot in the rope gets stuck in his carabiner. He's unable to descend any further. Due to his frozen condition, he can't free himself from the knot. The rescue team is too far below to help now. The only way for Tony to get down is to free the knot himself, but his body is completely numb. Despite trying again and again, he's unable to descend, remains hanging in the air. Lucy climbs up slightly and tries to encourage him, telling him to hold on. But even moving his hand is almost impossible for Tony. He says, "Lucy, I'm so cold." And with those final words, he takes his last breath and dies. This moment becomes the most heartbreaking one in Lucy's life. She had loved Tony and wanted to spend her life with him, but she couldn't save him even, though she was so close. This tragic event becomes etched in history in the final scene of the movie to reveal that Lucy quit her job and started working as a photographer in her hometown. Later in 1938, Austrian and German climbers finally summited the Eiger Mountain by following the same route taken by Tony and Andy. And with that, the true story portrayed in this film comes to an end. If you want to hear the next story based on another movie, let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know which movie you'd like to translate or hear next.